They told us it was a routine reconnaissance, a small patch of land barely visible on the maps, somewhere beyond the fog lines of the Pacific. But even then, something in the air felt off. I remember the way the officer avoided our eyes as he handed over the sealed envelope. The wax stamp still warm, the ink smudged as though written in a hurry. No coordinates spoken aloud, no official record locked. Just one sentence: proceed to the island. Do not engage. Do not document. It was the final stretch of the war, and exhaustion had dulled our instincts. Orders were orders, and in 1945 disobedience wasn't bravery, it was suicide. Still, as our ship's engine hummed to life, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't being sent to find something, but to make sure something stayed lost. Even now, decades later, when I close my eyes, I can still hear that low static hum that haunted the cabin radio, like the sea itself was whispering a warning we couldn't understand. We laughed it off back then, joked about ghosts and enemy traps, pretending not to notice how the compass needle quivered even before we left port. Every man on that ship carried the same unease, though none of us said it aloud. We filled the silence with talk of home, of what we'd do once the fighting was over, anything to drown out the thought that we might not be coming back. Looking back, I realized the unease wasn't fear. It was recognition. Some part of us already knew the truth. We were crossing into a place that didn't belong to maps or men. And when the horizon swallowed our last glimpse of mainland light, the sea turned perfectly still, as if holding its breath. That's when I understood some orders should never have been given. The morning we set out, the ocean looked wrong. Not dangerous, not storming, just wrong. The water was glass flat, untouched by wind, reflecting the grey sky so perfectly it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The kind of silence that presses against your skin until you start hearing your own heartbeat too loudly. We moved through it like ghosts. No gulls overhead, no sound of waves breaking against the hull. Even the motor, steady and rhythmic, seemed to sink into the stillness rather than cut through it. Every few minutes, one of the men would clear his throat or cough, not because he needed to, but because the quiet had become unbearable. Private Mason tried breaking the tension first. "Maybe the ocean's taking a day off," he said, forcing a laugh. No one responded. It was the kind of joke that fell flat before it even left his mouth. Sergeant Hale just stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the compass that refused to point anywhere consistently. The longer we drifted forward, the stranger it felt. Our instruments flickered. The radio crackled once, then again, before dissolving into static. Corporal Dean adjusted the dials, smacked the side and frowned. "Base command, this is Recon Unit 7, do you read?" Nothing. Just that hollow hiss that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The men started whispering. Maybe we're out of range. Maybe it's the fog. Maybe it's nothing. But nothing was becoming its own kind of threat. Every sound we made felt swallowed, absorbed by the sea like it was listening, waiting. Hours passed, though none of us could say how many. The sky never changed. The line of the horizon never moved. It was as if we were traveling through a photograph. A single frozen frame that refused to end. I remember running my hand through the water once. It was cold, but not like the ocean should be. It felt dense, heavier somehow, as though the sea itself was holding something beneath. Sergeant Hale ordered us to conserve fuel. "We'll turn back if we don't see land soon." But he said it without conviction. His voice cracked on the word soon, like he already knew the ocean wasn't planning to let us go back. Then, the fog began to rise. Slow at first, curling from the horizon like breath from some enormous mouth. The air thickened with a metallic taste. Mason said it smelled like iron. I thought it smelled like blood. The radio gave one last burst of static. And then a voice, not from command, not from any frequency we recognized, just a few warped words. "You shouldn't be here." We froze. Dean stared at the radio, his lips pale. "Who said that?" he whispered. No one answered. The signal died before we could respond, the dial spinning wildly as though something on the other end had simply disconnected us. Minutes later, Hale pointed toward the mist. "There," he said quietly, "dead ahead." Through the fog, a faint outline began to take shape. Jagged cliffs rising from the still water, their edges sharp as broken glass. The island was there, exactly where no map had ever said it would be. And just before the fog swallowed it again, I saw movement. Something tall, thin, and shifting along the shore. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. But in that instant, every man on deck knew it wasn't the wind. We were not alone. We hit the shore in complete silence. No waves broke against the sand. They simply stopped, as if the water itself refused to touch the island. The air was thick and still, tasting faintly of rust and ash. Every footstep sank into soft soil that looked freshly turned. Though no tracks marked it, it felt alive beneath our boots, like something had been moving just below the surface not long before we arrived. The fog clung low to the ground, coiling around our legs as we advanced inland. Vegetation grew in odd patterns, twisted trees that seemed to have burned and regrown all at once, vines threading through rusted metal debris. It was as if nature had tried to reclaim something it didn't understand. Sergeant Hale raised his hand for silence, but there was nothing to silence. No insects, no wind. Even our breathing sounded too loud. That kind of quiet gets into your bones, makes you feel like you're intruding on something ancient and asleep. We came across the first structure about 100 meters in Chetunchenkyo, a concrete bunker half swallowed by the jungle. Its door hung open, rusted and warped, but there were no signs of struggle. The walls were covered in faded markings, circles intersecting lines, geometric patterns painted in a deep, almost black red. Not Japanese, not American, not any language or symbol I'd seen before. Private Mason pointed to the roof. "Look at that," he whispered. Embedded in the concrete were bullet casings, fused into the stone, like they had melted during impact. But the walls showed no damage. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't a normal firefight. Inside, we found remnants of equipment, ration tins, torn uniforms, half-burned papers. On one table lay a fragment of a notebook, its edges charred but a few words still legible. They told us the island wasn't real. Dean laughed nervously. "Guess we proved them wrong." His voice didn't sound like his own. A low vibration rippled through the ground just then, faint but unmistakable, like the hum of distant machinery buried deep below. It came and went in intervals, each pulse lingering a second longer than the last. Hale crouched, pressing his palm to the dirt. "You feel that?" We all did. The men exchanged looks. Some said it was seismic activity. Others muttered about hidden tunnels or generators. But I noticed something else. The hum wasn't random. It had rhythm, like a heartbeat. Further inland, we found more ruins. Not just bunkers now, but what looked like small housing units, long abandoned. Doors swung gently in the windless air, and broken glass reflected the dull sky like staring eyes. One wall bore a series of strange stamps, a mix of numbers and letters arranged in no military order. Hale recorded them in his notebook. "These codes don't match anything in our files," he said. "Could be foreign intelligence." But the deeper we went, the less it felt like any kind of intelligence we understood. The structures grew older, stranger. Concrete gave way to black stone, polished smooth, covered in carvings that pulsed faintly when the hum grew louder. Mason's voice cracked. "It's coming from under us." We followed the sound to a clearing where the earth had collapsed into a circular pit, revealing what looked like a sealed metal hatch, huge, ancient, and humming with that same low frequency. There were no hinges, no handles, only symbols carved across its surface. For a long while, no one spoke. The air felt heavier here, charged with something we couldn't name. Finally, Hale broke the silence. "We open it." The men hesitated, but orders were orders. As we gathered our tools, I glanced back toward the sea, or where it should have been. The fog had swallowed everything behind us. The island was all that remained. We had arrived, and whatever waited below, I was awake. The hatch was heavier than it looked. When we pried it open, a rush of stale air escaped, thick, damp, and faintly metallic, like blood and rust mingled together. It carried the unmistakable scent of age, and something else, something living. Hale ordered 2 men to secure a rope line, and we descended one by one into the darkness below. The ladder was slick with condensation. Each rung groaned under our weight, the sound swallowed instantly by the dense air. My flashlight beam cut through the black, trembling slightly in my hand. The tunnel walls were smooth metal, seamless and cold, not the rough texture of wartime construction. It felt deliberate, engineered, but by who and when, none of us could say. As my boots hit the floor, I realized we were standing in a corridor that stretched endlessly in both directions. The walls curved gently inward, making it feel more like the inside of something's throat than a man-made structure. Hale's voice echoed behind me. "Stay sharp. We move in pairs. Keep your eyes forward." We started down the left passage. The air grew colder, pressing against our skin like invisible hands. The deeper we went, the less our flashlights seemed to help. The light didn't travel naturally. It stopped abruptly, absorbed by the dark instead of illuminating it. Then came the first sound, a faint rhythmic tapping. Metal on metal, perfectly timed, like a clock ticking beneath the floor. We froze. The sound stopped too. Hale raised his rifle. "You hear that?" Before anyone could answer, the tapping started again, this time from behind us. Dean spun around, light trembling across the corridor. Nothing there, just smooth walls and the rope line vanishing into blackness. Mason muttered, "Could be dripping water." But no one believed it. There was no moisture, no echo of falling drops. Only the repetition of that mechanical rhythm, now faintly joined by something worse. A voice. It was distant at first, so faint we thought it might be the wind, but the words grew clearer with each passing step. A whisper, fragmented, mechanical, layered. "You came back. You came back." The flashlight in my hand flickered violently, and the beam fractured like glass. For an instant, I saw shapes moving just beyond the edge of the light. Silhouettes pressed against the walls, gone the moment I tried to focus. We pressed on, though every instinct screamed to turn back. The corridor widened into a crossway of 3 branching tunnels. Hale marked our path with chalk, but when we glanced back moments later, the markings were gone. The wall was smooth again, as if it had swallowed them whole. The tapping had stopped, but in its place came a deep vibration that we could feel more than hear. It pulsed through the floor, slow and steady, rattling the metal panels under our boots. Dean leaned close to one of the walls, frowning. "It's hollow," he whispered. "There's something behind." Before he could finish, a sudden clang reverberated down the corridor, like something massive had struck from the other side. The sound rolled through the tunnels, bending and twisting until it became unrecognizable. Our flashlights flickered again, one by one. Hale barked for us to stay together, but the air itself began to distort. The light warped, stretching shadows across the walls like long, reaching limbs. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices now, some in English, some not. I caught my reflection in a warped metal panel and almost didn't recognize it. My eyes looked too wide, my skin too pale, as if the tunnel itself was draining the color from me. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. The air was still, only the faint hum remained. That same vibration we'd heard from above, stronger now, pulsing like a heartbeat through the walls. We followed it down a sloping passage until the corridor opened into a vast underground chamber. Our lights swept across the expanse, catwalks suspended over a deep pit, cables dangling from the ceiling, machines long dead but perfectly preserved. And in the center of the room, surrounded by dust and decay, something still glowed. A console of dull blue light humming steadily, alive after all these years. Hale exhaled slowly. "Whatever this place was," he murmured, "it's not finished." The hum led us deeper into the chamber's heart, where the walls began to change, metal giving way to something more organic, textured like bone beneath layers of rust. The floor was littered with fragments of glass and twisted metal pipes. When our light swept the far end of the room, we froze. Rows of tables stood in perfect alignment, covered in a fine layer of dust that seemed untouched for decades. But beneath it, faint outlines of hands, human hands, pressed into the grime, as if someone had stood there only moments before. The tables weren't for study or assembly. They were for restraint. Heavy leather straps hung loose from their sides, and rusted clamps glinted in the dim light. Sergeant Hale approached the nearest one, brushing off the dust. "Looks like a medical station," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. The smell here was thicker, copper and decay, the scent of something that had died a long time ago, but never quite left. Dean's flashlight caught on a glass tank in the corner, cracked but mostly intact. Inside, something floated, or what was left of it, a human shape, distorted and grey, eyes long gone, skin fused with tubes that disappeared into the tank's wall. Mason stepped closer and stumbled back instantly. Jesus, what the hell were they doing here? Hale leaned in, squinting at the label beneath the tank. A metal plate corroded with age, but one word still legible. Subject. No number, no origin, just a subject. We moved through the lab slowly, each step revealing something worse than the last. Charts lined the walls, diagrams of anatomy overlaid with symbols none of us recognized. Circles, intersecting lines, strange notations written in multiple languages, English, German, Japanese, even Russian. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't the work of one nation. It was as if all of them had been here together. A chill settled over us. Hale picked up a small box from one of the tables and opened it. Inside were dog tags, dozens of them, each from a different country. American, British, Soviet, Japanese. None of it made sense. Wars divide, they don't merge. But here, in this buried place, it looked like division had been erased. as if the conflict up above had been a distraction for something far darker beneath. Dean whispered, "You think this was some kind of alliance?" Hale shook his head. If it was, they didn't want anyone to know about it. We found a chalkboard near the back, its surface still faintly marked despite the decay. Equations mixed with words. Convergence, neural mapping, containment breach. Mason's breath quickened. Containment of what? That's when we noticed the symbols carved into the walls. At first we thought they were artistic, decorative maybe. But the deeper we looked, the more wrong they felt. The lines pulsed faintly under our light, like veins illuminated beneath skin. I felt something hum behind my ribs, a resonance that didn't belong to me. My pulse matched the rhythm of the walls. And then we saw the bodies, 3 of them slumped against the far wall, skeletons in tattered uniforms. The insignias didn't match. 1 American, 1 German, 1 Japanese. Yet they all bore the same mark carved into their foreheads. A circle intersected by a triangle. Their bones were fused to the floor, as if melted into it. Dean backed away, shaking his head. No, this isn't possible." But Hale didn't move. He stared at the bodies for a long time before whispering, "They weren't fighting each other. They were an experiment." The air seemed to thicken. Somewhere in the distance, metal groaned. A long, slow sound like something waking up. Our lights flickered again, dimming for half a second. I could feel it then. The sensation of being watched, not by eyes, but by the place itself. The humming grew louder, synchronizing with my heartbeat. Mason dropped his flashlight, and the beam rolled across the floor, catching something etched near the far corner. Words scratched hastily into the metal. "It remembers." Before I could read more, everything went silent. No hum, no vibration. Just breathe. And then, soft as air, a voice whispered my name. It came from nowhere and everywhere. After that whisper, nothing felt the same. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was listening. Every breath, every footstep came back to us slightly delayed, like the tunnel itself was repeating what we did, trying to learn the rhythm of our movements. We tried to keep formation, but the longer we stayed underground, the harder it became to tell distance from direction. The corridors curved in on themselves. The hum we'd heard earlier returned. Faint, irregular now, but beneath it came something softer, more human. Words. Laughter. Mason was the first to crack. He froze mid-step, flashlight trembling, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. "That was my brother." None of us answered. He turned to face the darkness behind him. "He said my name," Mason insisted, his voice breaking. "He said he found the shore." Dean grabbed his arm. "Your brother's in California, Mason, focus." But when he turned back toward the passage, his own face went pale. "Wait, where's the chalk line?" It was gone. The mark we'd drawn to trace our path had vanished again, as if the wall had simply swallowed it. The air grew thicker, warmer, almost humid, and with it came the smell of salt and smoke, like a memory of the sea. I blinked, and for a split second, I saw sunlight spilling through an open window. My childhood home, my mother humming softly as she folded laundry. The image was so vivid I almost reached for it, until it flickered and died. Just cold metal and dust remained. Hale's voice cut through the confusion. "Stay focused. None of this is real." But even he sounded uncertain. His flashlight beam darted across the walls, catching faint impressions. Handprints, faces forming in the condensation, shifting when we looked away. Dean started muttering under his breath. "The walls are breathing," he said. "You see it, don't you? They move when we stop watching." We wanted to tell him he was wrong, that fear was twisting his senses. But when we stood still long enough, we saw it too. The faint pulse of the walls expanding and contracting, as though something vast beneath the surface was inhaling. The voices multiplied after that. They didn't shout or scream, they comforted me. Familiar tones. The men's wives, their children, my own father's voice, calm and gentle. You did the right thing coming here. It should have soothed me, but instead it hollowed something out inside me, because he'd been dead for years. Mason broke formation again, chasing a faint light down the hall. "He's waiting for me!" he yelled. We ran after him, but the tunnel bent impossibly, swallowing him in an instant. His flashlight vanished, his voice echoing from nowhere. "He says I can go home!" Then silence. We called his name until our throats burned, but the sound just bounced back, warped and overlapping. Sometimes it sounded like Mason calling for us. Sometimes it sounded like ourselves. Hale took command again, his jaw locked tight. "We're not splitting up again," he said. But his eyes kept darting to the darkness ahead, as if something there was pulling at him. He kept hearing something we couldn't, a faint whisper that seemed to follow his every move. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, barely audible, "It's my wife." We tried to stop him, but the whisper grew louder, curling through the air like smoke. He turned toward it, the flashlight trembling. "She's calling me," he murmured. "She's hurt. I have to." He stepped forward before we could reach him. The light flickered once, and he was gone. The beam vanished into the dark, swallowed completely. For a long time we stood there listening. The whisper faded. The hum returned, steady and deep, echoing through the tunnel like breath. And somewhere ahead, beyond the walls that pulsed and listened, something waited, something that remembered. We searched for hours, shouting Hale's name until our voices frayed into whispers, but the tunnels swallowed every sound, giving nothing back. Eventually we stopped calling. It was pointless. The air had changed again, heavier, charged with a pressure that made our ears ache. Even the hum that had haunted us since the hatch had dulled, replaced by something more mechanical. Dean was the first to spot it. A small room off the main corridor, half buried beneath collapsed metal beams. The door hung crooked, and inside the smell of ozone and decay hit us like a wall. The beam of my flashlight swept across the floor. Cables, broken glass, and a single reel-to-reel recorder, miraculously intact. Its power light still blinked faintly, like a dying heartbeat. Mason's replacement, Corporal Dyer, knelt beside it. "It's still running," he said quietly. The reels turned slowly, though the tape inside was frayed and warped. A voice crackled through the static, distorted beyond recognition. But the rhythm of it froze us all. It was Hale's, not the voice we'd just lost to the tunnels, but older, more tired. Dyer adjusted the dials, and the words came through in fragments. "Repeat transmission. Containment breached. Cycle repeating." The voice stuttered, echoed, warped. Then a clear phrase, "If you hear this, you were never meant to." Dean stepped back, shaking his head. "That's not possible," he said. "That can't be him." But it was. Even under the static, I knew that tone, the clipped precision, the steady cadence of a commander trying to sound calm when everything's gone wrong. We listened as the tape continued, skipping and looping. The ones who never leave. It remembers. It becomes us. Then silence, a brief pause, followed by a sound that made my skin crawl. Heavy breathing, not from the recording, but from inside the room itself. Dyer swung his flashlight toward the corner. The beam hit another reel recorder, identical to the first, its reels spinning in perfect sync, though no one had touched it. The voice bled through again, this time clearer. "We'll turn back before the fog returns." Dean lunged forward and stopped both recorders at once. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, faintly, we heard the same words whisper down the corridor, not from the machine, but from the dark itself. "Turn back," Dyer cursed under his breath. "This place is playing with us." I wanted to agree, but something about the tape bothered me. The date scrawled on its label was smeared, but I could still make out the year. 1945, our year, our mission. The tape had been recorded before we even arrived. Dean's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something beyond fear. Realization. "We're not the first," he said. "We're part of it." This is the cycle he was talking about. The thoughts sank into us like poison. Every corridor, every whisper, every reflection. Maybe none of it was real anymore. Maybe we were already ghosts walking through someone else's memory. The hum returned then, louder than before. The floor trembled beneath our feet, the walls groaning as dust fell from the ceiling. The recorders began to spin again on their own, both playing at once, Hale's voice overlapping in endless fractured repetition. Never leave, never leave, never leave. Dean shouted, "We have to move!" He grabbed my arm, dragging me out into the corridor just as the sound reached a pitch so high it hurt to think. A low rumble built beneath us, growing into a roar. The walls buckled. A shockwave tore through the tunnel, flinging us to the ground. The explosion came next, blinding light, deafening sound, sealing the passage behind us in a storm of dust and metal. When the noise finally faded, I turned back. The way we'd come was gone, crushed beneath tons of rock and steel. And from somewhere deep beyond the rubble, Hale's voice whispered one last time, "You were never meant to." When we finally climbed back to the surface, it felt like we had surfaced through time itself, not water. The air outside was thicker than before, heavy with salt and something metallic that coated our tongues. The fog hadn't lifted. It had deepened, swirling like it had been waiting for us to return. The sun was gone, or maybe it never rose. The sky had no color, only an endless grey that pressed down like stone. Dean staggered onto the sand, coughing. "The compass is spinning again," he muttered, holding it up. The needle twitched violently, circling so fast it blurred. Dyer tapped his watch. The hands spun too, faster and faster until they stopped completely. Noon, midnight. It no longer mattered. The island had its own rhythm now, one that didn't care for hours or days. We tried to find our bearings, but every landmark had shifted. The shoreline curved where it shouldn't. Trees we'd passed earlier stood in new positions, their trunks bending slightly toward us, as though watching. The ruins in the distance glowed faintly beneath the fog, their angles distorted, bending in ways the eye refused to understand. The ground trembled with each step. It wasn't an earthquake, it was breathing. You could feel the rise and fall through your boots, a slow, deliberate motion that matched the pulse we'd heard underground. "The island's alive," Dyer whispered, half in awe, half in terror. Dean laughed bitterly. "Alive? You think this is life?" He pointed toward the water, where the sea lapped backward, pulling away from the shore instead of in. "It's not alive. It's remembering. Every sound felt wrong. The waves echoed like distant voices, repeating our words seconds after we spoke them. When I called Hale's name, the fog answered, 'Hale, Hale,' and each echo softer, closer, until it felt like someone was whispering it directly behind me. We didn't talk after that. We just walked. But walking didn't help. The island folded around us like paper, reshaping itself. Every direction brought us back to the same clearing, the same broken bunker, the same footprints half filling with black water. The air pulsed with a low frequency, almost musical, and for a moment I thought I could hear Morse code buried in it, an SOS that never ended. Dean's face looked hollow, the color drained. "Do you think maybe we never left the tunnels?" he asked. I wanted to tell him no. I wanted to tell him we'd escaped something unnatural. But the truth was starting to settle in. The same truth Hale's tape had warned us about. Maybe the island wasn't a place at all. Maybe it was memory, repeating itself through whoever stepped on it. The fog thickened until it was impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. We followed the sound of the sea, or what we hoped was the sea. The ground beneath us changed again, turning soft, slick, almost pulsing like muscle. My flashlight flickered, and for an instant I saw faces forming in the mist. Familiar ones. Mason, Hale, even my own. Their mouths moved, but their eyes were empty. The hum rose to a deafening pitch. The trees began to sway, though there was no wind. Shadows darted between them, too quick to focus on. Dyer screamed, firing his rifle into the fog. The shots echoed back a split second later. The same sound, the same rhythm, but from behind us. I grabbed his arm. "We have to move now!" We ran toward the faint sound of waves. The fog fought us, thickening with every step. But at last we broke through, the shore glimmering faintly in the pale light of dawn. The sea looked calm again, almost inviting. Dean stumbled into the surf, dragging the small rescue boat we'd left behind. "We're getting out," he gasped. Behind us, the fog pulsed like a living thing, retreating and advancing, breathing in sync with the tide. We pushed the boat into the water as the first light touched the horizon. The island's hum followed us, low, steady, eternal, like the heartbeat of something vast, ancient and awake. The boat cut through the still water like a blade through glass. For the first time in hours, I thought we'd made it. The island was fading behind us, the fog unraveling into thin strands that drifted apart in the dawn light. Dean sat at the bow, gripping the tiller with white knuckles, eyes locked on the horizon. Dyer manned the radio, twisting the knobs in silence. We didn't speak, not out of discipline, but fear that the island might still be listening. Minutes passed, then hours, or maybe seconds. Time had lost all meaning. The sun hung motionless in the same pale position, refusing to rise or fall. When I looked back, the island was still there, not smaller, not distant, just there. Dean frowned, adjusting the engine's course. "We're heading straight out," he said. "How are we not moving?" The compass spun uselessly. The GPS, if you could call the battered military unit that blinked with no coordinates. Dyer tried the radio again, voice trembling. "Base command, this is Recon Unit 7. We've completed extraction. Request static." Then a voice. My voice. "Base command, this is Recon Unit 7. The transmission echoed back perfectly, word for word, even carrying the same hesitation in my tone. Dyer's hand froze. That was, I grabbed the receiver. "Who is this?" "Identify." Silence. Then the same words, slightly delayed. "Who is this?" "Identify." Dean stared at me, jaw slack. "It's us," he whispered. "We're talking to ourselves." The sound deepened, multiplying, overlapping voices, repeating fragments of every word we'd spoken since leaving the island. Some were slower, others sped up, distorted until they sounded almost inhuman. The air grew cold, sharp. The engine sputtered, then died. The sea stilled completely. Our reflection on the water looked wrong. The angles sharper, the faces unfamiliar. Dean leaned over the edge, squinting. Something's moving down there. I looked too, and for a moment saw shapes beneath the surface. Not shadows, but outlines of us. 3 figures sitting in a boat, their movements delayed by seconds, as if the water were remembering us a moment late. Dyer began to pray under his breath. The fog thickened again, encircling us. The island's silhouette blurred, and I could swear it was closer than before. Dean gunned the motor, but it only coughed, echoing hollowly through the mist. Then the radio came alive once more, broadcasting a garbled mix of screams and whispers. Amid the chaos, Hale's voice emerged, clearer than it had been on the tape. "You were never meant to leave." Something in me cracked then. The words didn't sound like a warning anymore. They sounded like a law. Dean slumped forward. Dyer grabbed him, shaking his shoulders, but his eyes were glassy. His mouth slightly open, whispering something I couldn't hear. I tried to speak, to steady the boat, to shout that we weren't giving up. But the sea had grown mirror smooth again. Our reflection stared up from beneath. 3 faces, then 2, then 1. The hum began once more, low and patient. The fog rolled inward, swallowing the horizon, the boat, and everything in between. I felt weightless for a moment, as if the sea itself had drawn a breath and decided not to exhale. The last thing I remember is the light folding inward, the water pulling us down, and my own voice, distant, mechanical, repeating through the static, "We never left." Then nothing. It's been 50 years since that mission, though sometimes it feels like I never came back at all. The medals, the papers, the tidy letters of commendation, all of it feels like someone else's story. After the war ended, they told me to forget, to file the report as classified reconnaissance failure. The coordinates were struck from every map, every archive, every memory that wasn't mine. They didn't just erase the island, they erased the idea of it. I tried to obey. God knows I did. But forgetting isn't obedience, it's surrender, and some things refuse to be buried. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, I hear it again, that low hum, steady and familiar, pulsing somewhere beyond the edge of hearing. I've changed homes a dozen times, crossed oceans, lived through decades of noise and peace alike, but it always finds me, a faint vibration through the walls, the same rhythm that echoed beneath our feet in those tunnels, the heartbeat of the island. People say memory fades with age. Maybe that's true for most things, but not this. The faces of the men who went with me, Mason, Dean, Dyer, even Hale, they haven't aged a day in my mind. Sometimes I catch them in dreams, standing on the shore, calling me back, not accusingly, just waiting. Like they never really left. I once tried to return, took a ship out past the Pacific trade routes, followed the path I'd memorized in silence all those years. But the ocean was empty. No fog, no hum, no sign of land. The coordinates led nowhere, as if the island had simply stepped out of the world, taking its secrets with it. And yet, when the wind is right, I swear I can smell the air from that place. Salt and metal, rust and ash, the scent of something that was never meant to exist. I keep the old radio by my bedside now. It doesn't work anymore. But sometimes when the room is still enough, I hear a faint signal flicker through the static. Just one voice, soft and patient. It always says the same thing. Some orders were never meant to be followed.